Traditional banks are facing unprecedented disruption today.
Very importantly, a lot of companies don't actually know what is the problem they're trying to solve. You can attract people. People want to be inspired. The question is who can inspire them?
I guess that's how leaders are built. Today, I have Dr. Dennis Khoo with me. He is the managing partner at All Digital Future and the author of Driving Digital Transformation, a book that teaches you the ins and outs of the digital transformation in the banking industry, while also answering a key question: why do most transformations fail? Thanks for saying yes to the podcast, Dennis.
My pleasure.
So, I've got a few questions for you. Let's start off with the book that you wrote. Writing a
Right.
book takes tremendous effort and time and patience.
Yes.
So, what drove you to write this book? What was your key intention?
Well, first, as you mentioned in the opening, there's a big gap in the market. And having spent 3 years um, involved in a very complex digital transformation, I thought I could add value to many companies that are going to undergo that same transformation. So, that was my key reason to be able to share this information and hopefully raise the probability of success of many companies that adopt the methodology that I'm prescribing.
Got it. That makes your work all the more interesting. So, I would like to know at least one thing that made you the most proud throughout your career. What is that one thing?
Uh, I would say my in my career, I've done many interesting things. A lot of them quite breakthrough. In my early years in banking in Standard Chartered, I was involved in many of the breakthrough products. I helped to launch the first totally account in Singapore called eSaver. And then we went on to create many other innovative products for the Singapore market. For example, we worked on something that was breakthrough from the standpoint of being able to offer bonds in smaller quantities than 250K, where you could warehouse it. That actually, interestingly, was one of the things I did that wasn't that successful because in the end, there wasn't enough demand for it. Maybe because we didn't market it that well. Yeah, so I launched a whole range of innovative products like Extra Saver and so on and so forth into the Singapore market. And then I continued that in UOB, looking at, for example, Income Builder. That was a range of broadly diversified, multiple country, also diversified in terms of the investments they made across bonds, equities. So that became very successful as well. So I think the big satisfaction has been to work on very innovative solutions, both from the more traditional banking world, as well as, of course, in the new digital bank space with Tomorrow by UOB.
That's wonderful. I hope we get to know more about you and your work in this conversation. But what we already know is your contribution to building tomorrow, which is the new digital banking app powered by UOB. And that does not seem like a child's play. With that said, could you please highlight the major hurdles and obstacles that you and your team had to go through while creating this app? And also, I'm just curious, how big of a workforce did it take you to build the project?
We had many streams of work, right? So that I think, if I recollect correctly, there might have been 14 different streams of work. And so it was very complicated to bring something from the ground up. Um, you had to basically look at every single aspect from the proposition, looking at talking to a lot of customers. Also, we what made it more difficult was ASEAN is there's no common language, no common culture.
True.
uh, Banking tends to be a very local industry, so you have local norms, local payment networks. So that's already the first hurdle you face, right? As mostly Singaporeans trying to launch in Thailand, Indonesia, you have to learn the
The language.
local situation. So that was already one complexity. Then of course you have to figure out what is the differentiation you want to build. In something like a digital bank, there is no single performance difference you're going to create that will make everybody want to sign up, right? It's too commoditized for that. So you have to figure out what are the perhaps 20, 30 smaller things you want to focus on, where you can wrap the whole thing, focusing on very fine detail, make the whole experience very, very good. That requires a lot of attention to detail. So, you have a stream working on process, you have the people working on the overall end-to-end experience, you have the people working on product, you obviously have a technology, software development piece to it, you have compliance, you have credit management, you have the team doing the user interface, you have the team looking at data, right? And how to generate insights from data. And those are just some of the streams of work, and they all have to be coordinated, streamlined. So I think this was very tough. And most companies, most legacy companies or incumbents in their industry, when they attempt to do a digital transformation, they are roughly faced with the same challenges, right? Many different streams of work. How do you coordinate, piece it together? And I think one of the big difficulties is often you need to look at it from a systems thinking approach, because the implications are not linear. There tend to be feedback loops, right? So as a very simple, probably the simplest example of a feedback loop is that if you make the proposition very strong, you'll be very differentiated, right? Therefore, you think that against the competition, you probably will be able to differentiate and therefore scale. But if your difference is very big from your current core competence, you have a very big gap in execution. And that big gap in execution usually results in problems, right? Coordination problems and execution problems, which might result in you having a lot of difficulty bringing the entire solution to life. But then if you decide to lower the complexity, making it simpler, you may hurt the differentiation. And if you hurt the differentiation, then again, you have a scaling problem. And in both situations, your revenue may exceed your costs. And therefore, you end up with a problem. So these problems are circular in the sense that you've got to look at it in totality. And one of the biggest difficulties that I had, and this still persists today, is that there is really no method or map for the top team trying to orchestrate a complex digital transformation. You have many sub approaches, right? Design thinking, lean, Six Sigma, agile, you've got change management. You obviously have to have very good project management. You've got culture change elements, you've got new capabilities. You've got to make sure that you have a path to profit, that you're differentiated, but not too differentiated. And very importantly, a lot of companies don't actually know what is the problem they're trying to solve,
Yeah.
right? So you put all these things together, in my conclusion is no wonder that actually a lot of transformations fail, because an overarching methodology that can help you understand, right? What are all the different components, like a kind of Lego set that you can put together, right? Or a jigsaw puzzle that can help you understand, right? What are the pieces you need, has not materialized. And hence, this is what I focus on in chapter 5 of my book, to create a playbook that can really help companies across industries have higher success rates in digital transformation.
That sounds more challenging than I thought. And you must have come across similar obstacles of similar magnitude while writing your book as well, in which you highlighted the essence of design and why it's more than just making the product look pretty.
Yeah,
Moreover, the intricate use of design is also evident in the Tomorrow app. And as they say, design is a silent salesman. How
yeah.
about you expand on the importance of design?
Yes, I mean it's a triumvirate, right? You need great design, you need great process, and of course you need good technology. But it's not the other way around, right? It's not having great technology and average design and average process. And if your design and your process are very, very good, actually it makes your technology issues much simpler. And this is something that I think people don't get because unfortunately it's called digital transformation. So people mostly think it's about technology. It is actually mostly about getting the grand design, the fine design details, the process, and of course, the technology in place. So there are these three things that come together. And I kind of liken it to building a building, right? So it's easier for people to understand, right? If you build, if you're commissioned to build a great building, right, the best building in town, you don't usually showcase the builder. In fact, most of the builders are not known, right? You
Hmm.
first get the architect. The architect spends a lot of time doing research, understanding how people want to work in the future, right? Understanding your how we want to live, how we want to play, right? Then they obviously need to make the exterior design very beautiful, but also the interior design need to be habitable, and of course highly tuned towards the future of work.
Yeah.
And that equivalent is really the designer, right? And then after that, you don't start building because the civil engineer needs to make sure that the building can stand on its own. And that's where the process team comes in, right? To really understand, because if you don't map out the processes, if you don't re-engineer those processes, no technology is going to help you create a great experience. And then when you have those two kind of under control and really designed and mapped out well, that's where the building can start. And so in my experience, I think currently there's a lot of people who perhaps understand the basic elements of design, design thinking. The agile methodologies, I think, are now understood and embedded. But it's the process piece that is no man's land.
Hmm.
Often the client, the customer, the company doesn't pay enough attention to it, and vendors can't help you. Process
Yeah.
can't be owned by the vendor because the vendor doesn't understand your process. And to kind of address your question, right, on why design has become so important, it's really because of competitiveness. Competitiveness is fleeting today because information is so widely available, right? And also the way manufacturing has globalized and specialized means that you can't really keep manufacturing a secret anymore, right? So your secret black box. You can kind of reverse engineer anything today because of globalization and
Yeah.
because you're outsourcing. So if you put that together, the power of the internet, being able to reach, I mean, companies can reach their customers as large as larger than most countries, right? Today, if you look at number of billions of customers that Facebook has, bigger than any country. And that has not been possible without the connectivity, low-cost connectivity available today. So when you bring that all together, the competitiveness become extreme, and therefore design become very important, right? Getting the
Hmm.
design right, because it is no longer about the big things; it's about the small things done right in many industries. I mean, not everybody's going to invent a new business model, right? Meaning you're going to make money differently, right? In
Hmm.
banking, you're not making money differently. You're making money the same way. You're making money from the difference between the deposits you gather and the loans you make.
Yeah.
So it's not a business model innovation. Neither is the technology moving very rapidly in banking. It's not like in vaccines or other areas in biotechnology. It's not like in new energy, where actually the technology and the science is moving very fast. So
Yeah.
actually, most companies fall into this third category where I kind of label them as experienced companies. And in experienced companies, design and process very important. I mean, the best example is Apple and its personal computing products, right? I mean, the computing product industry is now 30 years old. The components, they're really not, unique components, right? A lot of the components are purchased from other providers. Yes, Apple's finally, now created their own M1 chip, but most of the other components can be sourced. And it's the way they put it together using design, using a process, manufacturing process. That's the power. And in very competitive industries, this has become the competitive weapon. But many industries, many companies are not ready. They have not built those capabilities in the past, and therefore they are not ready. And they don't quite understand, therefore, the role of design. Design requires you to be very considerate. Basically, the whole essence of design is you need to consider what are the important design consideration, design aspects, right, that you need to cater for. And so if you are not considerate, the design can't be good. If the design is not good, then you find that, oh, there's a lot of problem and you need to keep making changes. And therefore, you have a lot of problems in cost overrun because the technology guys build it and find, oh no, that's wrong, it's built wrongly, and if you change it, right? And you can imagine there are already so many streams of work and so many new things are happening. So it's actually sometimes one big chaotic mess.
Yeah, I get that. So I can say your opinion is the design should come first, the product comes second because you can't revolutionize everything. So, as you mentioned, banking, uh, it's all about the design and the loans and the processes they have rather than the business model
Yeah,
because the business model stays the same.
yeah.
I like that. Quite insightful.
But actually, unfortunately, it's even more complicated than that because it's two parallel streams of things, right? When we talk about design, process, and we talk about software and hardware and technology, right? They are really capabilities. Design is a capability. Process is a methodology, right? And
Hmm.
so, of course, you need those capabilities, otherwise you can't deliver. But if your earlier design in your customer proposition, your business model is wrong, right? Then, when you get to the feasibility stage, it's not going to work either. So you need desirability, which is getting the CVP right. You need viability, which is getting the business model right. Then you need feasibility and you need to understand the capability. So actually, it's no wonder so many transformations don't work out because it's really, really tough. And how I hope I can help is by further popularizing the methodology I put together that helps you see the entire space, right? Everything you need to do. And I really would have wished that in 2017, when I started, that I had a map like that, because it would have made it so much easier. And so when I was writing the book and came to this point, right, in the book, of course, it then dawned on me why so many transformations don't work out, right? And now we had this conversation, I think your audience would be able to, get a sense of why, so much money actually is wasted.
Yeah, so true. Well, if we have to step back a little and look at things from a macro perspective, traditional banks are facing unprecedented disruption today. And I'd say a big part of that, this movement is cryptocurrencies. Where do you see centralized banking heading as decentralization gains more traction from consumers?
Well, this is the most pertinent question in the field of banking, right?
Yeah.
I think fundamentally, as far as I can see right now, banking is unlike any other industry, right? If money disappears, the government will be replaced. You could actually cite that the fact that this is what happened in the global financial crisis. Money disappeared, a lot of people lost their jobs, the government was replaced. And so because money is fundamentally the essence of the modern economy, right? I mean, nobody can live without money in a bank, right? I don't think that it is going to be the case that any government will support decentralization of the creation of money. Now,
Mm,
whether they can stop it is a different question, right? Because anyone can just go and set up something, right? And right, it's your problem, right? If you want to exchange value with somebody, right? And if the person later finds a way to commit a fraud, then you lose the money. I mean, that's your problem, right? But I think that this is something that is the governments are not going to give up control. And if you're someone that believes that citizens can wrestle control from the government, right, and create their own fiat currency, well, that's a different story. But I would say this: we need to go back to the use case, right? What is the use case actually? There are some use cases that make sense, like I can't hold a central database, right? Because, for example, it's a network of competitors, and you can't find a third party, neutral third party that everybody is willing to accept that they will hold the database.
mm,
And so that's a situation, for example, in trade financing between competitor banks, right? You don't want the asset to be declared many times, right? You want the true ability to see whether the asset has been already pledged, and therefore the immutable capability, right, and the ability to trace from first origin makes a lot of sense in those cases. But I think there are not many other applications I can see where you must have it. Of course, today adding the word blockchain increases your value, so a lot of people do it, right? But what is the fundamental problem you're solving, right? Of course, if you say that, well, nobody can hold a database, that's fine. But if someone can hold a database will always be better, than having, all that power. It does suck up a lot of energy, right? To do this from first transaction, right? So
mm.
even if you make it more efficient, it's still less efficient than holding a database. And then there are the obvious weak points, right? While the method itself has its strengths, there are the parts of the whole system, right? Like who holds the repository, the registry, that are prone to attack. So I think there are many more question marks than there are answers at this stage. But as long as someone is prepared to purchase at a higher price than before, asset prices go up. It was the
Yeah.
same thing with mortgage-backed securities before everything came down. So the question is still open, right? But I think if you want to follow the trail, it's really okay. Tell me what's the great use case that we're talking about that no other solution would be suitable for.
You're right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good argument. Um, so, but I guess the main purpose of decentralization and why people are in favor for that is that they get to own the data, the users get to own the data. But as you mentioned, it is necessary for someone or a group of individuals to collectively manage it rather than giving it to everyone because that's not efficient. And yes, there are a lot of question marks and not that those many answers. But I guess as we move forward in time, there will be more developments, and let's see how this turns out because only time will tell.
Yeah, agree.
Yep. So I guess all we have to do now is wait and see how big the impact of crypto will be. But speaking of economic impact, it is now evident that most employees of this generation are unhappy with their jobs as well as typical corporate culture. And as retaliation, many of them probably seem to leave their jobs in search of freedom and better opportunities. This movement seems to make the work of hiring even tougher than it was before. Given your background and
Yeah.
how do you think businesses should tackle this problem of the Great Resignation? And when do you think this could come to an end or the situation could improve in the future?
Well, highly skilled talent is more important than ever before, right? Because today There's so much automation. So lower value work is and will continue to be automated in the future. So therefore, the competition for skilled workers, right, in knowledge areas, in design, for example, people who can redesign your process, right? Um, those, of course, now come at a premium. And I think the formula is the same as before, right? Number one, you have to tell a compelling story about your company, why your company exists, and the ambition you have, right? Because like the example I love to give, right? When the many thousands of workers were building the Great Pyramids, actually every day they were just cutting big blocks of stone and shifting them around. So if you tell them that, okay, the job is to cut thousands and thousands of pieces of stone and move them around, who's going to apply for the
Mm,
job, right? But if you tell them you are craftsmen and you are building a legacy that will stand the test of time, right, that will outlive you, then it's a very different story. So people, basically, they are moved by the story. So you have to have a good story. And if you have a good story, people will join you. Then you need to treat them well, right? You need to have a balance between performance, right? And you need to have a balance in terms of your humanity and the way you treat people. And those two must be in balance, because if you're too performance driven, then it's all about either money or glory, right? And perhaps that's not sustainable. But if you're too uh, soft, right, in terms of your ability to manage your performance, then there is no job in the end,
mm,
right? Because you are not viable. So being able to create that culture that is kept in balance in terms of how you challenge people, how you support them, right? How you create an environment where everybody has something to contribute. I think that's the problem today. That is far and few between. But you show me any successful company, I think behind that there must be a great working environment. And I think the annual ranking of the 100,000 best places, best companies to work in is a testimony that it can be done. So I think for companies that are facing big resignation, you can usually trace that back to the leadership.
true. Very true. Yep. Got it. Uh, so you believe if we are able to convey the vision of the company and
Yes,
get the get the employee a place to contribute to the company and contribute to the vision, that would make hiring easier. So how would you advise?
definitely. And it's my own personal experience that that can be done, right? Even if you are in a company not known to have been able to attract, right? And you know, you follow the mantra of what we just discussed, you will be able to pull people over. I mean, large companies were once small. How did they get big? They had to attract talent. How did they attract talent? They had great stories and they had a great environment to cultivate that story, cultivate the employees, keep them engaged, right? And people want to stay because they find, hey, if I go somewhere else, I may not have this environment.
Hmm. But how would you go about selling the vision to the employees in the first place? Because that's the hard bit. How do
Well,
you do
it's
that?
about how passionate you are, right? How well have you thought through, right? In fact, you can put it on one piece of paper. First, the purpose of your company. Why did you set up this company is your mission. And your mission must be more about making money. Your business, your mission must be about changing the world. Because how many people actually benefit just from the profit, right? It's not the majority of the company. Therefore, your company must do good, must make some change for your industry, right? Must bring opportunities. So that's your purpose. And then you have your ambition. Your ambition is simply if you carry your purpose very successfully, right? Then in your wildest dreams, what could you achieve? And between those two positions, right, you have to articulate four things, right? What are the values and behaviors? Because sometimes hiring the best people brings out the worst in people, right? You
Hmm.
get people who are think they know everything, who are very competitive, who want to get ahead of the rest, right? So values help you bring out the best internally, right? And secondly, your strategy has to be differentiated. And that's hard today in a world where there's fleeting competitive advantage. So you got to get a strategy right. And a lot of strategy is based on insight, right? Insight about your business, insight about customer problems. You got to get your big tactics right because strategy doesn't happen. Strategy happens as a result of tactics gone right. And finally, you need to make sure that you understand your key measurements. And your key measurements may change over the course of different stages in your company's growth. And so if you manage to articulate those 6 things very well, you can attract people. And I've experienced it personally, even if it's something you're doing from scratch. People want to be inspired. If the question is not whether they want to be inspired, is the question is who can inspire them.
Hmm. I guess that's how leaders are built. If you can share
Yes,
the vision, yep, got it. I believe this is going to be very helpful for the audience. Well, it was a great interaction, Dennis.
same here.
Yep, very insightful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.